Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first presentation. So our first speaker is Yuliya Desyatova, and she will be speaking on, her presentation is titled Meta Tasks on the Action-Oriented Approach. Yuliya, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today on a Saturday morning. So my name is Yuliya, and I am a recent graduate of the doctoral program in Language and Literacy Education at OISE, University of Toronto. I'm also an ESL teacher at the Canadian Centre for Language and Cultural Studies, more known as CCLCS, where I teach in the TESOL Canada and TESOL Ontario programs, preparing teachers. What I'm presenting here today is not a traditional research study, but a design-based project, a website that's being developed for adult English language learners. In the process of this design work, a certain type of language learning task has emerged, which I call the meta task, which I think can serve as another example of operationalizing action-oriented approach in the context of adult newcomer language teaching. Doesn't advance for some reason. Down. Something happened. Maybe this one. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So this concept of meta tasks. Is it on? I should be closer to the microphone. Okay, thank you. Is it better now? Yeah. Thank you. So this concept of meta tasks has emerged in the process of me continuously walking multiple paths at the same time. First of all, a language learner. I'm originally from Ukraine, so English is not my first language. As both language teacher and teacher educator, one of my the biggest parts of my work outside of class has been developing teaching and learning materials, which is probably nothing surprising for anybody who teaches another language. And one of the findings of my doctoral research has been the persistent theory, practice, and policy gap, which again, I think we have experienced at some point, all of us. So these diverse yet closely connected experiences brought me where I am today, developing a promising teaching learning resource that has led me to conceptualizing a type of very practical classroom activity directly related to the most recent advances in teaching methodology. This is why I could not pass the opportunity to speak here today at this symposium that made theory-practice connections an explicit focus. So here is the outline of today's presentation. We'll take a look at the origins of the English Language Bits project. That's what I called it. I'll trace the theory practice connections and the concept of meta tasks. And I will introduce the website, its current state and future directions. So the driving factors behind the resource development projects, why did I start it, was increase in international migration, which is not exactly a recent phenomenon, but there has been an increase of newcomers from Ukraine in recent years. And obviously, developing proficiency in the language of the new country is one of the many challenges that these people are facing. In Canada, we have a special program called Language Instruction for Newcomers to Canada, LINC, which offers free of charge English or French classes to adult newcomers. It's a federally funded program. It's existed since 1991. But we might think that over the 30 years, it has developed a wealth of teaching and learning resources. However, most of the resources that are freely available to teachers are assessment oriented. And Other resources that have recently started to become multimodal are still requiring certain institutional affiliation and commitment. Once you commit to using an online platform, you have to stay there as a teacher with your class. And interestingly enough, for example, this resource called avenue.ca requires a special training for teachers, which is quite extensive and intensive. And how intensive it is, you can see even from one of the names of this initiative, which is called Learn IT to Teach. So teachers need to become proficient in designing online learning materials. There is also a wealth of settlement-oriented resources, but very often they require advanced language proficiency and fluency and high digital literacy. Another option for newcomers would be accessing settlement materials in their first language. But again, this seems to be like a separation of language learning and real-life tasks that learners are expected to solve outside of the classroom. So we are trying to bridge that gap between settlement and language learning with the website that I'm developing. So here are some issues if we again sort them according to teachers and learners that exist in the Canadian context. Many newcomers may not be ready to become traditional language learners because they are facing extreme survival pressures. They were often not prepared, not planning to move, and often spend their last savings on airfare to Canada. They have to start working, and they do not have these hours and hours of time every day to spend in a link class, which offers between 20 and 25 hours a week. Teachers are usually also working without a curriculum unless their school has developed a curriculum. We do have a language proficiency standard, which teachers are required to use, but it does not really offer curriculum materials. So most teachers spend about 20, 25 hours in class with the same class, which you can imagine how intense the curriculum and material development workload can be. So many teachers find this support in the form of language proficiency standard as unsatisfactory and the demands to create materials overwhelming. I thought this is just a finding from my doctoral project, and I was hoping it has changed, but just recently, actually yesterday, when reviewing this presentation, I found this tweet where in the UK, they are offering free language teacher training for teachers to become teachers of speakers of other languages. So it's a government-sponsored teacher training program. So we can see there is a real issue with attracting teachers to the profession and retaining them. And you can see this was a comment to this tweet that the profession does not look that exciting considering the material development workload. So this is a very recent yesterday's post. So things have not changed in years in the sector. And one more, again, evidence that resources are actually badly needed. This is a post from a teacher trainer who also was wondering, where do you actually find resources if you were to teach a class tomorrow? So this is the response. English language bits, we are trying to meet the real life needs of adult newcomers learners without limiting them to language learning needs per se. We are building on tasks as task-based language teaching defines them, but we are pushing those tasks into a more action-oriented approach, as has been described in the book by Enrica Picardo and Brian Norse in 2019. So we are developing tasks into what I call meta tasks. We are not just using language in real-life situation, but we are trying to gain certain knowledge about the real life context, which is usually taking quite a lot of time to develop. We are trying to condense this knowledge into an accessible language in accessible task. So we are pushing language learning beyond linguistic and task performance focus. We are emphasizing learner agency, autonomy, and action. Action not necessarily only in the life of the learner, but in the wider social context. So we are emphasizing newcomer agency and autonomy, and of course, building on their communicative competence, but their agency and autonomy are likely to be severely constrained as a newcomer, not just by lack of language proficiency or insufficient proficiency in the target language, but also by limited knowledge of the local context, not only social, but political and cultural. And again, usually that knowledge develops during many years of living in the new community and the new society. And at the same time, these newcomers are facing a pressure to function and perform and survive. So how are we facilitating this pressure? And thank you. It's a bit tricky. Thank you. So these are some examples of how tasks differ from meta tasks. So I've seen it very often in my classes where a newcomer would go to an emergency room because their child has a mild fever and some cough. So in addition to just completing a task, there has to be some knowledge of how systems work in the new environment. So it could be choosing the proper healthcare option. If we are speaking about healthcare, it could be responding to a phone call, but being able to quickly enough distinguish a legitimate message from a scam call. Or when you're inquiring about a job opportunity, again, there could be many tasks that we have to complete before getting a job. But newcomers may be lacking understanding of how these tasks build into a successful, support them in successfully securing employment. So again, this is an example from a very recent post on Facebook. This is how sometimes we are looking for work when we are desperate. And again, possible meta task ideas could be, we don't want to have it as a very patronizing lecture telling people what to do and what not to do, but we are trying to present this knowledge in a very interactive format. For example, possible ideas would be listening to a conversation with a job search counselor. So you can see most of these tasks will start with a receptive task where content is presented in a conversation between two expert users or insiders in the community. And then there could be a discussion analyzing this video, preferably it's a video or an audio more commonly, where certain steps or certain knowledge is being highlighted. So what is a meta task? It's an interactive exploration of in-depth knowledge of an action domain, whether that's job search or healthcare. Why meta task is necessary? Because this knowledge does not necessarily come from task performance. It may need to be acquired prior to even selecting which task is appropriate in a certain domain for a certain situation. And this expert community participant knowledge we usually take for granted, but it takes a long time to develop, and many adult newcomers do not have time to wait till this knowledge is being developed. So an example of a meta task can be a conversation with a more experienced user. And again, newcomers may lack access to those experienced users. That's why we present those conversations as an audio recording. There could be an in-depth discussion of that receptive task to highlight valuable components of insider knowledge. And productively, or as a next step, as an extension, learners may engage in researching a system or domain functioning, but this would require a sequence of either receptive and productive as well tasks. So here is the website itself. We have a mix of both tasks and meta tasks. We use listening as a springboard to develop a range of linguistic skills. And we try to engage all the activities of reception, production, interaction, and mediation seamlessly. The website is targeting both language learners, adult language learners, and language teachers. The goal is to have a variety of topics and language learners from beginners to advanced. We are not there yet, but we have a good start. So why we selected listening, it's usually considered a Cinderella skills, and many teachers consistently report challenges in finding appropriate listening materials, especially for beginner learners. It's crucial for improving integration, especially at the beginner stage, and it does not really necessarily develop on its own just because you're being immersed in the target language. So we also see listening as a driver of language learning and developing further other language skills. So this is what the website looks like. So far, we have 34 units which built on either a task or a meta task. It's open access. It does not require any login creation. It's available to everyone. This is a sample of a few samples of meta tasks describing Canadian education system. It's just a 3, 4, 5 minute listening where usually it's a conversation between two speakers, or how, for example, how volunteering can assist in finding work. This is one of the most popular bits so far, a comparison between public and Catholic schools. So you can see the interface of a unit. It starts with vocabulary introduction. It has self-check exercise to check listening comprehension, but probably the most useful, in addition to the original conversation, would be the discussion questions, which encourage learners to engage in production and mediation processes. So this is a brief description, and we are looking forward to building this resource further. It also includes handouts for teachers that are printable if teachers think that that's going to be helpful. But of course, all the materials are easily adaptable, and we think the audio recording accompanied with a video will serve as a springboard to develop further extensions, further projects and tasks that could be useful for adult newcomers. So here are our plans, adding materials, especially for lower levels. So we welcome collaborators, contributors, and just voices to read out a script. Good actors and not so good actors like me are welcome. We are trying to promote the website, and we are searching for some funding sources because so far it has been a volunteer project. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback, comments, and questions.